Right, so next job then. Well, that heel board's all done now. I'll just wax some primer on there. We are back inside the boots. Obviously this side is all prepped now. That's all cut out, ready for new metal to go in. I need to do the cut out the bottom quarter there actually. This side, however, there's something dodgy going on over here. So I don't know how well this will come out on the camera, but it looks to me like someone has put plates on the inside here. Very, very crudely just tacked it on. But they're, I don't know whether I'll be able to show this, but the plates are just like pushed in up against the panels, and there's a big gap up between. Let me grab a light. So hopefully this will come out. Can you see? It's like it's double skinned. There's the plates that they've put up inside. And then there's the outer skin, so I need to get those plates off. I don't know why they've done it like that. So let me start cutting all that out, and I'll be back in a moment, and we'll see what it looks like.
Hey mini enthusiasts, how are you doing? Welcome back, I hope you're all well, and I hope you're having a great day. So quite a long video this one, and there's quite a few time-lapse sections in it, just because I was working really quickly, so I thought I'd talk my way through them. So I was actually dreading repairing the back end of this car because, for the very reason I mentioned earlier, I could see it had been bodged up, and there's nothing worse than trying to unstitch bodges and put right work that has been done incorrectly last time round. It just makes it a lot more difficult because you don't know what you're dealing with until you start cutting away. So the back end of the car, initially when I started cleaning off that underseal, I thought it was better than I was expecting, but as you can see, even though the underseal had done a good job, it has still rotted through in places quite significantly, and there's probably just as much work as I thought there was previously. So this bit of the back here is quite a complex piece. So you'll see there's 3 layers of metal there. So you've got the boot floor, you've got a strengthening plate, you've got the subframe rear mounting bracket, all welded together. That's standard. There are 3 pieces of metal on that section, so it's pretty strong, and yeah, trying to unpick it is quite difficult. What I hadn't actually noticed up until about now was it has had a bit of damage in that rear corner. I don't know whether you can see it just around that rear light lens, but there is definitely a bit of a dent in the panel there, so that probably hasn't helped with the rust and the rot. Nothing serious, you know, nothing that's creased the boot floor or anything like that, but it's definitely been backed into something, or something's gone into the back of it there, done a light bit of damage. So I've got that section out. I'll show it in a little bit more detail in a moment, but the way they'd repaired that was just ridiculous. I don't know why they'd done it like that. The good bit from this stage on, this is, I think it's not quite the last bit of rotted metal to come out yet, because I've got to do the rear corners below the rear lights. Just cutting out a bit more of the boot floor there to make sure we're going back to good clean metal. If there's one thing I've learned over the years with welding, is welding clean metal to clean metal is I say easy. It's still a bit of skill involved. You've still got to get used to it, but it is so much easier welding clean metal than trying to weld clean metal to rust. And I've sort of learnt the hard way over the years. You cut a tiny bit out and you're trying to weld it and you're blowing holes and that sort of thing. You are just better off just going big, cutting it out as far as you can. Sorry for the camera angle here. I'm just going around now cleaning up the metal where the panels will join. One thing I should have probably done, and I've made this mistake before, is if you've got rear speakers in the parcel shelf and you are doing any sort of white grinding, cutting or welding on the back, take the speakers out, because they've obviously got big magnets in the bottom of them and it will just wreck the speakers. Those speakers unfortunately are probably wrecked, but Bruce doesn't even have a radio in it, so but just a warning to the new owner, those speakers will probably sound horrible. They'll be full of grinding dust, unfortunately. But yeah, I should have remembered to take them out, but I didn't. My bad.
Well, as you can see in the time lapse, that turned into a very fiddly job, but I've got it all cut out now. Yeah, I've just got to weld a lot of metal back in now. So I had to slit through this panel here because they're welded from the inside. Like I say, it was double layered. I'm actually replacing the very bottom half here, but I'll just need to seam weld that slit back up, but I couldn't get it out without slitting that. The actual metal I've taken out, you'll see what I mean. So that's the inside of the boot, and they'd laid metal up against here and welded it from the inside, but as you can see, the gap there, this is the rear corner, so there's a good inch gap between the outer layer and the inner layer. I mean, just a ridiculous bodge up, and then they've covered it all in like fiberglass, probably because the welding's really rubbish. So yeah, that's all in the bin now. Let's just start rebuilding.
I saw a post on Facebook the other day. Someone commented on a video about overseals, and it did make me think about these bodges in a different way. And what they were saying was, if people didn't do these bodges in the past, then these cars wouldn't have lasted long enough to get to the point that they were worth repairing properly, if that makes sense. So, you know, if 10-15 years ago someone didn't fit overseals and they didn't do those bodges, the car would have probably ended up in a scrapyard long ago and never got to the point where it can get properly restored.
Right, so the first bit of metal to go back in, I need the back part of this wheel arch. No expense here spared here. I'm going with Heritage original panels. Well, no expense spared. I got given this. Once again, thank you to Onchish. So this is a complete wheel arch. It's a Heritage panel. For some reason the outer edge has been chopped off, so I don't know why. Onchish probably knows that. I need this bit down here, but I need the full bit. So the first bit I've got to do is cut off the bit I need, and I will seam weld that outer lip back on.
So fairly straightforward job here, just cleaning up the metal. Because it's just been slit and we're welding back the exact same piece of metal, obviously it's so much easier because the gap is perfectly consistent down the weld line. You can see here I alternate the welds from one position to another just to try and prevent the panel from distorting too much. curved panel like this though that tends not to distort. If it's anything flat, you really struggle then with distortion. And being inside a wheel arch, it doesn't matter too much anyway.
Right, so that's that wheel arch fully repaired now and welded back in. The next step is to get this rear quarter in, and again, shout out to One Chish. This is the panel he gave me in a load of spares he dropped off. This seems absolute sacrilege because I'm only going to use this bit here to repair that part, but don't worry, because I know some will think that's an awful waste of a panel. But Mark on the Mark III Cooper S, he needs this repair section down here, and whenever we've ordered repair sections before this bit, what we found is down the bottom here, when you get the repair sections, they're completely flat, whereas the original panel does have it has a bit of a, is it concave, it bows out a slight little bit. It's very discreet, but it does bow out a very slight bit at the bottom. So I think Mark will probably use the bottom piece of this panel as well, so it is going to go to good use. And yeah, and I guess anyone doing a repair up here, it might be useful, but certainly we're going to use that back bit, and this bit down here will probably be donated for use on the Cooper S.
And just to add to that, if you were doing a repair on the back similar to this, you can actually buy repair sections that look exactly like that piece I've just cut out there. The only difference being, I think they're Magnum. The actual repair piece is joggled, so it has a lip which you can, it's not overlap, it's underlap behind the panel to weld it on. You will notice I'm absolutely not a fan of overlapping panels, joggling panels. I never do it. I always try to butt weld, because as soon as you overlap a panel, it's somewhere for corrosion. It's when you're got two layers of metal sitting on top of each other, you will get condensation between the layers, and you'll get corrosion problems with them. So I know some people do joggle panels and they'll overlap them and they'll plug weld them, and yeah, they'll last, but yeah, I'm just not a fan of it. I'll always butt weld. I can't actually think of an instance where I don't think I have joggled a panel and welded it like that before.
Right, so that's this corner, just about done for the moment. So we've got the repair section in here. I've welded up the slit. We've got the replacement bottom of that wheel arch in. This panel I set ever so slightly back from the old panel, so it's probably only like 1/4 of a millimetre, but it's just slightly further back. So as you can see, the grind lines there, the top part is a little bit proud, and that's because when you put a skimmer filler on, you'll lose that join. Same sort of here, just before I welded up that seam, I just tapped it in lightly along, so when a skimmer filler goes on, you won't see the join. I do still need to do the bottom repair section corner here. I don't have it yet, it's on order. And the inside's all looking good. Compared to what it was, to be honest, this is ready for the closing panel to go in, the boot floor to go in and to be reassembled. I need to do the same on this side, although things are not as bad on this side. I need to repair the wheel arch. I need to do the bottom of this quarter. And I need to do beneath the tail light as well. But it's, yeah, it's not as bad. So we're progressing nicely. I'm not going to film this side. It's exactly the same as what I've done here. So let me get that done, and if by magic, I'll be back in a minute. Right, so the next bit is getting this boot floor repair section in, and I've got to say, it fits really badly. Much fettling is required. It is a Magnum panel, and even if you look here, you can see that hole is lined up. I had to reshape the inner wheel arch. That hole is lined up, but these are way out, and I did think to myself, maybe this back panel's bent, but I've put the boot on, and obviously the boot is not going to be bent. The boot lines up nicely. I mean, there is a bit of damage here, so I did think maybe it was pushed in a bit, but doesn't seem to be. Now this is going to be tricky, this is, because that's a really long piece of weld. Profile wise here is okay, but then when you look over here, we're out a little bit, so I'll try and film as much as I can, but this is going to be a bit tricky getting this right.
So this type of repair here really is a test of your welding and fabrication skills. I can already see, if you look to the left there, just behind the battery tray, I've got a huge, great big gap to fill there, but not too phased by it. I'm sure I'll sort it out. It is just a really big panel to cut out and get it exactly perfect the whole way long. I did think, and I've seen it done before, where people would just overlap them and just cut between a slit between both panels. If you're using a 1mm slit disc, that'll give you a 1mm gap, and in theory that should work, but I didn't try it. Maybe one day I'll give it a go, but as you can see, I've got a bit of work to do on the left hand side there, and you'll see me here grabbing out probably a bit of copper to back the panel with. So if ever you have got to fill up a gap like this, and if you're welding a panel where you're a little bit worried about distortion, if you can get a nice flat plate of copper, I just use a piece of, I think it's 22mm copper pipe, and then I've just flattened it in the vise. So it's probably a couple of mil thick, 2 or 3 mil thick in total. And if you put that behind the surface you're welding on, one, it acts as copper is a brilliant heat sink, so it will take heat out the panel and stop the panel distorting, or help stop it distorting. And 2, you can't MIG weld to copper, so the actual weld will not stick to the copper. But obviously copper is electrically conductive, so it'll allow you to start the weld. You can actually build up a weld puddle on the copper, but it just won't stick to it. So it's quite handy when if you're ever having to fill up a hole. So if you've maybe drilled a spot weld hole and drilled the whole way through, you can back it with a piece of copper. Or like this, where you've got quite a big gap between the panels and you are trying to weld between the gap, you're trying to butt weld, yeah, a little bit of copper between gives you something to back the weld pool up against. I'm actually using my old GoPro Hero 6 for this footage inside the boot, just because I've damaged lots of GoPros in the past with welding sparks and that sort of thing, so the Hero 6 is sort of my camera. I'm not too worried about it gets put into all sorts of dodgy situations, but it continues to survive. I think unfortunately the battery goes flat just before I finish this, but the only difference is you can see on both sides there's a little bit missing on both sides, so I actually have to cut a bit of metal out of sheet and to fill those gaps up.
Right, so that's our boot floor all seam welded in now. I was slightly out on the shape, so hence it took a bit of fiddling around to get it right, and the panel wasn't big enough to do these bits right at the end here, so I've had to make up bits. But that's all welded in now. We've got a solid boot floor. I have just put the spare in to make sure it still fits. Yeah, pleased with that. It's taken me ages to do, to be honest. The next bit I need to do is these corners. I've got repair sections to go in here. It's obviously just corroded down the bottom, and this lip doesn't leave me much to weld to, so I've got repair sections to go in the corners, Magnum ones again. Again, it's holed there, so we'll cut it out and get them done. First, I think I'm just going to have a bit of a tidy up though.